Well, it's almost over. Everybody's been patient. I appreciate it. I'm Double D, second generation member of the Outsiders Motorcycle Club from Tacoma, Washington. I'm the spokesperson for the Washington Confederation of Clubs. I'm heavily involved in INCOM and the U.S. Defenders at the national level. Basically, I have about 20 hats and I try to do as much as I can to have a positive impact on this community. In 2011 in Washington State, we were able to do something that's never been done before in America. We unanimously passed the first piece of legislation that addresses the issue of law enforcement motorcycle profiling and discrimination. We unanimously passed that. It was amazing. The important thing, aside from the fact that we passed this law and the reason that we're here today, is how we did it. How is it possible that for the 20 years previous to 2011, the motorcycle community in Washington State was not able to pass one meaningful piece of legislation for 2 decades? And the reason why we were unsuccessful is we had an inability to unify the community across the board. In 2009, that started to change. Within the organizations, the Confederation of Clubs and ABATE, which are the 2 major organizations for patch holders and independents in our state, the leadership finally had a change in perspective, and they changed the paradigm, how they looked at the world. Instead of allowing club politics to pass the line in the door when we walked into these meetings, we decided we were going to leave all club politics outside of that door. Because the issues that we're dealing with, discrimination and profiling, are not about club politics, they're about freedom. And freedom needs to be the primary goal and the primary focus of this community. How do we unify everyone? We started, first of all, in the patch holder community, and quite honestly, what it took is the leadership of the clubs in the Confederation and across the state to understand that we have a lot more in common than we have differences. The history of this community goes back 40 or 50 years. But if we live in the past, we'll never move forward. What's important is to understand that we have more in common than we have differences. And once we understand that, and once we can leave club politics at the door, then we're able to pick the best people for the best jobs. We're able to pick the best spokesperson, the best person to run a network because they organize things, the best person like Twitch to handle the media. And then what we did, after we got our own house in order, and after the clubs agreed that regardless of club politics, we were going to work together for the singular purpose of passing a profiling bill, we did something that also hadn't been done successfully for the last 20 years. We reached out and we drew a bridge to the independent community. And we drew that bridge because it's important that everyone understands, regardless of whether you're in a club or whether you're in an independent organization, we all have more in common than we have differences. For many years in our state, independents didn't view their issues as the same as patch holders. We had a change of heart, and the change of heart is Donnie Breeze, who you heard spoke a few moments ago. He was the first person that we had in Beta, Washington for over 20 years that understood that there was no difference in the issue of profiling discrimination between patch holders and independents. Once he was able to bridge that gap and unify the independent community behind that goal, then things really started to happen. In 2009, this process began. We weren't able to get a single sponsor for a profiling bill in the state of Washington in 2009. In 2010, we were able to get 3 key sponsors, and we were able to pass it unanimously out of the House of Representatives. Although that session ended and we ran out of time, so we were not able to pass the bill until the following year, it was very, very successful and the farthest that we had moved in the last 20 years. In 2011, the situation and the momentum completely changed. We had 13 sponsors for a bill in the House of Representatives and in the state Senate. We were able to unanimously pass our anti-profiling and discrimination legislation through our House of Representatives, through the fiscal committees, and through the Senate. We received not a single no vote in 2011, and we're able to pass the first bill to address this issue in America. Once we made the decision that we all had more in common than we had differences in both the patch holder and the independent community, one of the essential and important things is to make sure that everybody is networked, meaning everybody is communicating and everybody is able to take action simultaneously. For example, if this bill gets sponsored in the state of California and it gets assigned to a committee, and we know who those committee members are, it would be important to reach out to those committee members, communicate with them, and send them letters. The best way to get that done is for everybody to be on a unified network So when the call to action goes out to write a letter to your legislator, everybody is doing it at the same time. You know what's interesting to me as I look out at this crowd? In the state of Washington, we thought it was amazing when we were able to get 300 people to our state capitol. And in fact, that's the most patch holders and independents that we've gotten to our state capitol is 300. With a spokesperson for the patch holder community, which was me, and for the independent community, which was Breeze, with 300 people supporting us in those legislative sessions, we were able to unanimously pass this legislation. That was only 300 people. I look out at this crowd, and the infinite potential of the state of California goes far beyond anything that I've seen in any other state. We were able to change our reality with 300 people. With just the amount of people that you have here gathered now, you could change the entire world if you're unified. There is a lot of power in this constituency, and there is a lot of intellectual capability, but until this community unifies and starts working together, those things won't rise to the top. But once they do, and if you make the decision to unify both the club and the independent community in this state, you will be an unstoppable force. An unstoppable force, and that's what this is all about. Remember, we talk about freedom, and we talk about motorcyclists and bikers being one of the last bastions and last communities that represent freedom. One of the essential parts of a free society, or at least the free society that we have in America, is something that's called the democratic process. But unfortunately, for those people who don't want to participate, democracy does not happen by itself. It only happens through participation. You can have this many people who are involved in clubs and this many people involved in the independent movement in California, but until you come together and decide that you are going to take a stand and that you are going to unify and work together, all of this could be for naught. We could walk away today and we could leave this rally, and unless we make the decision that we're going to unify and we're going to back each other and we're going to pick the best people for the jobs in the state, the best spokespersons, the best representatives, the best organizers, and everybody agrees to equally back them, if that can happen, then your reality can change just as quickly as ours did in Washington. And this legislation is extremely important. It's the same legislation about word for word that you have proposed in California. Since we passed this law in 2011, there has been over a 90% reduction in profiling and discrimination stops in the state of Washington. It just does not happen very often. And when it does happen, there's not a single example of an individual who challenged it where the ticket or the incident was not dismissed. Currently, we're involved in a huge lawsuit with a smaller city, Eastern Washington. It's more rural than the west side where we live, because they felt that it was appropriate 2 years after the bill passed to discriminate and profile a massive amount of riders at the Confederation of Clubs event that we had in the Tri-Cities. Not only were every one of those tickets dismissed, but we were just successful in the first leg of a lawsuit, and our Confederation of Washington State was granted nearly $50,000 because they didn't want to release critical public documents that proved they profiled us on that day. Not only did we receive that settlement, but it sets the foundation and gives us the critical documents that we need to pursue a civil rights claim. And even though it's a state law and a state established right, if it's a state constitutional principle, it can be challenged under the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment, which means we're able to file a Section 1983 claim, and it becomes a legitimate and actionable civil rights claim. So not only have the stops and the profiling incidents been reduced by a massive amount, and not only did we pass the law, but it has teeth, and we're making them pay where it hurts, which is monetary. That's the way that you have to work the system. Pass the law, and then enforce the law, and make sure it has teeth. Look, every element the state of California needs already exists. There's very intelligent people in this crowd. You have lobbyists and politicians who support this legislation, who will actually get it sponsored and get it transferred to a committee. If this community can organize and agree to mobilize behind this effort, it could be one of the most important things that's happened to motorcyclists and bikers in America. You may not know it because you live inside the state of California, but what happens in California matters, and it matters a lot. What happened in Washington is having an effect. We have numerous states now who are looking at our profiling legislation and saying, look, it's been done in Washington, it's something that we could do here. But the ability and the power of the state of California to impact the political schematic of the motorcycle world in this country, as I stated earlier, is insurmountable. what happens in California tends to snowball across this country, good and bad. So not only if you unify behind this effort, are you changing your own reality here in California and advancing your right space here, but you're quite honestly advancing the right space of motorcyclists across this country, light years ahead of what you can do without you. Thank you very much for your time. At the beginning point in this process, if you get the bill sponsored, you want me to travel back to California to speak for you, to help organize this community, to give you the documentation and the essential material that we use for our successful effort in Washington, the connections are there. You don't need to ask. I'll come back 10 times. Thanks.